Hello, I'm Toycat, and the Ukraine-Russia war just got a little bit crazier because, as you're probably already aware, a lot of eastern Ukraine has seen fighting basically since the war began. In fact, some of these regions have even been annexed into Russia. This is a wild thing for Russia to have done, and it isn't internationally recognized, but these four parts of Ukraine are now officially Russian, but in reality see a lot of fighting between Ukrainian and Russian forces, but Ukraine has been basically on the back foot for most of this war, but that is something that changed a little bit yesterday as Ukraine launches a raid into Russia. For the first time, it's not just all fighting on Ukrainian territory, but instead Russia itself is seeing some of the effects of war, and this is a very, very wild thing, which you might think, if you know about the CSTO, Russia's version of NATO, causes a little bit of international concern, because surely this means that Kazakhstan or Armenia, or indeed Belarus, are now going to have to get involved on the side of Russia. But interestingly, the CSTO is going through some things, which means that nope, that won't be happening. And so why is that? Let's dive into it today. So first things first, yes, there is a lot of Ukraine outside of Crimea, which has been Russian controlled since 2014. There is a lot of Ukraine which is kind of up for grabs. That is what the war is about. Ukraine wants to go back to their old borders before the war. In other words, they want to say, no, you can't just invade us like that. And Russia wants to take as many parts of Ukraine as it can, kind of as a punishment for daring to move closer towards the west and not moving closer towards what it sees as its, its traditional ally. And so, the best thing you do when you want to prove to someone that you're a really good friend is you invade some of their territory. And so that's what Russia did. And, it's not working yet, so they're thinking about invading even more. This is the long story short, the TLDR of 2 years of fighting. Obviously, there's a lot going on there. But now, instead of just managing to take their territory back, Ukraine has decided to actually push into Russia. Specifically, in case you're curious, the Kursk region of Russia. This is really interesting because this was a pretty notable site for during World War II as well. It's a key first part if you're going to take deeper into Russia, which obviously isn't Ukraine's plan. Instead, Ukraine's plan is to draw forces away that would otherwise be attacking Ukraine and say, no, you have to defend now. You can't be solely on the aggressive. Now you've got to play a little bit of defense as well. And this is a really, really interesting thing. It's an interesting tactic, right? That for the longest time, Ukraine has had to be cautious about stepping anywhere close to Russian territory, because even though Russia has been continuously and deliberately invading Ukraine, they haven't been able to actually have a fair defense. And so this is a big power move to say, yeah, actually, we can hurt you too. In reality, even if Ukraine wanted to, which I think they have very clearly stated they don't, even if Ukraine wanted to, they wouldn't get anywhere close to taking a substantial chunk of Russia. It's not like that in the same way, Russia took, this is the wrong map, it's not like in the same way if Russia took these four places from Ukraine, that Ukraine can say, actually, if you're going to try and keep those places, we're going to take some of yours to make this even. But instead, it might make them come round the table and start seeing sensibly, except actually not in reality, because even though this is a big weakening move for Russia, Russia just got invaded, and their friends, the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, it is Russia's version of NATO that they set up after the fall of the USSR. You might recognize a lot of these countries as suspiciously lining up with those, with intriguingly, the only countries outside of it are like observer states, with Serbia over here, or cooperation states like with Iran here, or former observers, like in the case of Afghanistan. You get also refused to join as a fascinating stance for, I believe, Turkmenistan to take, but not Tajikistan, sorry. But the interesting thing here is the fact that despite all of this happening, is that Tajikistan? It was Turkmenistan. I can't believe I second guessed myself there. Anyway, the interesting thing is, unrelated to the video, just want to mention it. So, an interesting thing about all of this is the fact that all of these countries are not jumping aboard Russia's side, and this is something you might look at and say, wow, that makes Russia look weak. And to be fair, Russia has said that it won't be asking for assistance from them, and so no, actually, it's not Russia looking weak, except actually at the exact same time, Armenia is going through a big plan to split from the military alliance. Armenia, just for those of you geographically unfamiliar, is all the way over here, and as you can see, there is this interesting situation of it's not actually right next to Russia, so if they leave, Russia can't do the old, Russia loves a good old, ooh, do you want to leave a political alliance? We might invade you, but it's a little bit harder for Russia to invade Armenia, and so as a result, they're slowly pulling away. They are still doing so slowly, but literally yesterday, they skipped a huge military exercise that the other CSTO states are going through, and so it's a little bit of an embarrassing time internationally for Russia. Again, a country which is trying to project its strength, which, you know, admittedly pulled that off in the last few years, taking more and more of specifically one of its neighbors that it keeps trying to say it's really good friends with. But, you know, Russia has been pulling off its military strength, but at the same time, it's being invaded, and its own security alliance, which already only had, if we're being brutally honest, the B team of states out there, right? If they already only had the B team, and now they have a situation where it's like, yeah, even then they're not really helping in what might be the only time that any of them are invaded in the modern era outside of Russia invading one of them, right? So it's a pretty interesting situation, to say the least. Speaking of interesting situations, I think that this is a really interesting time to kind of dive into what actually is going on with Ukraine and Russia. I feel like every time a story gets this long, people start to fall out of it. And this is, you know, sometimes this is something that people get really bitter about when it's their favorite cause. They're like, well, how can people stop caring about our thing? You know, there's a bit of a meme that people are like, oh yeah, I care about the current thing, and I'll put the flags of the current thing in my bio. And, you know, right now, we've had too many other issues to care about what's going on in Ukraine. And even though that's a cynical way to view things, I think there is a truth that if you get your information from the news, then you're only going to get that information when the news is especially new. It was horrifying when Russia first invaded Ukraine, but every additional little step, every additional re-step hasn't been that exciting. It's been a lot of back and forth, and is that good or healthy for the way international opinion works? No, but is it the way that it actually works? Yes. And so as a result, in case you're curious, what does this mean for Ukraine? Are they feeling really good about this? Well, the truth on the ground, you know, outside of the fact that Russia retaliated pretty bad, and there's a lot of people, genuinely civilians, injured here, I think I read some interesting insight here. So this is from Al Jazeera. I tried to most of the sources I try to use in these videos are from BBC or Al Jazeera. You can they are also in themselves biased sources, but they are the least biased sources outside of the territories they're in. So when we're talking about something which is particularly British focused, obviously the BBC might have, at least, even if it doesn't try to, it's going to have some amount of British bias, and so Al Jazeera is going to have a very Middle East heavy bias too, you might be able to say. But interestingly, this is a situation, right? The Middle East isn't that bothered with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, and so I believe it's a good way to just get a bunch of reporting, a bunch of actual information without having to dive deep into someone's opinion there. But I thought what was really interesting is that a military analyst from London's King's College here said that they basically put it down to the fact that, yeah, actually, the Ukrainian command was afraid that the Kharkiv offensive would not end at Kharkiv, and there was some speculation they might enter there, but they're trying to say that they're trying to this was a slap to Russia's face that Ukrainian could get through the border, and they're really trying to get into the fact that there is Ukraine does not feel like they are on the front foot. It might look like it is if you just read a headline. It might look like it is if you just see some stories and when you just see some horrifying clips that are happening on the Russian side. But what's really going down here is that this is one of the worst situations for civilians in the world. The fact that 12 people just died in a supermarket attack. The UN says that July has been the deadliest month for Ukraine civilians. Even though you can argue that civilians in a country have some blame because they vote for the politicians that cause other countries to have to invade them. Even if you really stretch it, right? Oh, by the way, here we go. It's this is it's Russia is basically getting a little bit pissy to say, yeah, we can defend our borders here, and they're doing so by killing a lot of civilians on the other side, which is an unavoidable thing in warfare, to be fair, to some extent. But the fact that the people who are paying the price for this conflict, which, let's be honest, is political, it is Russia saying to one of its close by member states that, like, yeah, actually, we think that you should be part of us, and if you won't at least not agree to be part of the West, then we're gonna cause a lot of people to die until you change your mind. And so there's an interesting kind of like, what is the end game on this war debate that has been going on for a while. It's weirdly enough come up in the US presidential election where Trump has been like, yep, I could end the war and I could just go in there, get it done. And even Russia's had to say, even though Russia is generally more pro-Trump than more pro-Democratic Party, even then they had to be like, yeah, we saw statements that they would resolve the conflict in 24 hours, but then we saw someone else say that China's a bigger problem, so clearly it's not going to happen. It's just pre-election rhetoric, they literally say. And so I think that is a really interesting thing to dive into, that really, to some extent, this does depend on international peacemakers. If you let the Russia and Ukraine war grind on forever, Russia probably gets ahead on the sheer size of their own military, and Ukraine just about holds on to not losing everything, or close to everything. You know, the reality is, if the West did not help Ukraine, I could imagine that there would be an Eastern Ukraine and a Western Ukraine, and the Eastern Ukraine would be either part of Russia or a puppet state by this point. So, you know, the Ukraine is holding on, the Ukraine is managing to do counteroffensives, but it looks as though the actual end state of this war is likely not going to be in Ukraine's favor. It's also likely not going to be in Russia's favor. They might have gained, you know, like they might end up with full control over Crimea, officially and legally. They might end up with even, you know, a few of these regions of, I think Luhansk and Donetsk are particularly interesting regions of Ukraine when it comes to this stuff, because of the, I believe they're incredibly Russian-speaking countries, Russian-speaking parts of it too. Like they were already places that had some weird guerrilla stuff going on there before, but the end result is not one that benefits Ukraine or Russia. The end result isn't even one that especially doesn't benefit their citizens, and so the end result is going to be that, yeah, we show that war is extra painful, and not really with any victors in the end. It's the painful thing about, I guess, defense and military spending, is that you have to spend a bunch of money to counteract the other people spending their bunch of money, so that a lot of people who have nothing to do with the war die, so that you can both prove that, yeah, but this wouldn't happen. What if they came back and did it again? And I feel like there is no sillier tragedy than the one happening with Ukraine and Russia, and I guess the only thing you can take from it is, well, at least, you know, at least there's no nuclear weapons involved. There's just at least it's just a bunch of people dying and not us destroying millions of lives and civilians from other countries. But it's still it's not good, is it? Can we take that as an ending from this video? It's not just not good on a human level. It's not good on a political level. I think this is a really bad look for Russia, a really bad look for the international community to some extent, and really, I think the craziest bit is that somehow this is, if there's one good thing, at least it's a bad look for the US that they need to, it's a bad enough look for the US that they're looking to be involved, or at least that they're willing to claim to be involved, so, you know, it's part of their pre-election rhetoric. At least there's some sign that they think that this is a big enough deal now that they're willing to go through that. Anyway, with that said, I hope you will enjoy this video. In case you're curious, by the way, I think the odds in that US election shifted slightly. There's a really fun thing. You can see the fundraising by party. It's impressively, this is the opposite of what you'd expect. It's more left-leaning than right-leaning in the US right now. The polls have just switched over, right? I am fascinated by what's going on in the US election. But yeah, what is much more important is that maybe people don't. Also, it's the same image. Interesting, huh? I wonder who got it from whom. Or maybe they're both from Getty. Oh, it's from Reuters. There we go. Anyway, so with that said, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you found it interesting. And I hope that, you know, we have a lot of I hope that fewer people end up dead this time next year. That's my goal. Wouldn't it be nice if Ukrainian and Russian people did not have to shoot each other for the sake of politicians somewhere else? It's a crazy opinion. I should just be pro-war. It's more fun, you know what? Nah, I think that they should just keep on fighting, and that there should never be an end to this war. This video was brought to you by today's sponsor, the military-industrial complex. Hey, have you ever considered not violently fighting your neighbors? Well, what if they're considering violently fighting you first? Well, you'd have to arm to defend yourself. Or maybe even, go crazy, you'd have to start shooting your neighbors first to remove their ability to shoot you. Buy a weapon today. Use code TOYCAT. Get 10% off. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.